Let's see. I'm gonna start things up. It'll be unusual because we'll be starting on time. Uh, but I know that people are carving time out of busy days, so we'll get started. I'm Mark Fossett. I'm the director here at the Texas Census Research Data Center, TXCRDC, or just RDC. I could say that, RDC. Anyway, please come and go. There are restrooms straight down the hall. As you get to the end of the hall, turn right. Men's room, women's room, and we have drinks in the back. I think most people have found the sandwiches. We'll take a break later and have some more snacks to make sure nobody goes away hungry. And just a quick overview of what we'll do today. Getting involved in RDC research is kind of a long-term project, and we don't expect for anybody to come away today ready to go. So all we're doing is helping you today get acquainted with what an RDC is, what it's got to offer, if it sounds interesting, how you would go about trying to use it, and the process that you would go through to take advantage of it. So think of it as the beginning of a conversation. And if you find out after 20 minutes that this is not going to be, something that you can take advantage of because you're doing other kinds of things, you don't have to stay until the end. You don't just regardless of how it turns out, thank you for coming. Please spread the word with your colleagues about what you find out about. We do one of these workshops each semester, 3 over the course of a year. And we can also do small group workshops. So if you are here as maybe the only one from your department or college and you think, hey, I wish some other people had come, give me a call or an email and we can do that. We can come over to your department and hang out with the group. It could be something like this or something much shorter and more informal, whatever makes sense. So just a quick overview of what we're doing today. There are some handouts. So there's a handout with an agenda. There's a handout which has a print of the slides that I will use. And then there's also a handout that has the slides that Bethany DeSalvo would present. And I today am in the role of Bethany DeSalvo because she's busy being a new mom and couldn't be. I don't know where her priorities are. Anyway, she has a brand new baby.
I think sleep is one of her.
Yeah, I think sleep. Yeah, it's like I don't remember those 3 years actually. So this first handout just gives you the agenda. We'll try to stay close to it so you can predict what's going on.
Where are the handouts?
Actually, they're right at the head of the table. And so as we're getting organized here, it's a pretty small group. So let me introduce some folks from the RDC, and then go around the room so people can become acquainted. The way it works, if the RDC becomes a resource for you, you'll get to know everybody here because we'll be helping you at least occasionally. And then we also have a speaker series. If you're interested in the RDC, you'll take a greater interest in the speaker series because we have researchers come in who have experience doing research in RDCs, and there are tips and tricks that you can learn from them that would make it easier to think about projects, make it easier to plan and plan projects and write proposals, and then they can tell you kind of where the bodies are buried, things you have to worry about, and be realistic about when you're doing work in an RDC. So I mentioned I'm Mark Fossett. I'm the director here, and the Census Bureau has a title they use called Executive Director, but I don't get an executive order from me, so it's a long title, but I'm the chief flunky. And then Bethany DeSalvo, who's not here, which is unfortunate because she's the person who actually is most important. Bethany is a Census Bureau employee, so I'm an A&M employee, which means I have no juice with Census whatsoever. Bethany is a high-level Census Bureau employee, and she's affiliated with Texas A&M by being on site, which I'll explain in a minute what that involves. But but she is a federal employee, and through her, she's a liaison. She can help you directly. It's like, she's here, and there's a census outpost right here. It's like you're traveling to Washington, D.C., to census headquarters, and you get to talk to somebody at a very high level who knows the inner workings of census, their data, what's accessible through this operation and what's not. So Bethany really is the person you ultimately want to get to know. Bribe her with a six-pack, ham, whatever, because she's someone who can really help. I can help a little bit. I can help you get to find Bethany. Okay, and she's on maternity leave right now, but we'll be back, I'm sure, in January and maybe sooner on a part-time basis. So also, you may run into Tiffany Evans, our office associate. She helps organize things. She's just around the corner in room 101, which is where our regular offices are. This is our seminar room. And then we have a lot of graduate students and researchers affiliated with the center. And so the graduate students, Amber Fox over here, will be helping out with the presentation. Gabe Amato right here is taping. You're doing something here, right? Hanging out. Okay. And does anybody need? Are voices being recorded?
Yes.
Okay, so you could. NSA is present and say nice things about Texas A&M and the Census Bureau. And Nicole Jones sitting beside Gabe. She's helping some researchers in political science with a project that they're developing, and that's a kind of a resource that, at least for our initial period, we can offer. I'll tell you a little bit about a seed grant program, which is how that can work. We have Nathaniel Rosenheim at the end of the table, and he's from, well, let's see, Amber is from sociology, Gabe is from sociology, Nicole's from sociology. We made an exception for Nathaniel, and he's from landscape architecture and urban planning. And he's been helping with proposal efforts coming from that college, from the College of Architecture. Jeremy West, down at the next to Nathaniel, from the Department of Economics. And he's been helping with proposal development efforts by faculty members in economics. Each of the graduate students has a particular expertise, sometimes associated with the project that they're helping with. Amber, Nathaniel, and Jeremy have been with us since we started up, so they help prepare a lot of the materials on our website. Amber knows a lot about data sets and how to find documentation on data sets. Nathaniel and Jeremy know a lot about particular data sets, especially some of the more complex ones that economists and planners use, and they know a little bit more about the computing environment. So they know some things. They'll all be talking for a little bit in the middle, in a short while. And then also with us is Maria Perez-Patron, who's a postdoctoral researcher who's hanging out here and also is a research analyst with our lab. And what that means right now is we have a consortium with investigators at universities in the region, and they could potentially coordinate with her to help their projects be more efficient. And then what that means right now mostly is that she can open the door for them when they come here to work, because for some kinds of projects, in order to use the facility, there has to be someone on site representing, in this case, the National Center for Health Statistics, in order to use the computers. So let's see, if I missed anybody from our group? A couple of things. I'll tell you, there's a hard copy handout. It's small, the type is small, but this is also going to be posted at our website if you'd like to share it with anyone. A couple things about history. So part of what this is the beginning of a conversation. Okay. Nobody comes out of here able to do RDC research. You just learn enough about it to know if you want to keep talking to us. So a little bit of the history, which will give you an idea of the quality of this resource. I started working with a group in 2008 to try to go for a proposal to get an RDC here. That group wound up involving 8 different colleges here at A&M, 5 different universities in the region, and it culminated in an NSF proposal, which ultimately was successful. And in 2010, we got the award. It became active in 2011 with a bunch of budget drama. With these days everything at the federal level is full of drama. And our first year, all we did was build a physical facility. We didn't lay brick and mortar, but we had to renovate existing space and convert it to the specifications needed to put in a secure computing lab. And it had to meet the specifications of some folks at the Census Bureau and the Internal Revenue Service, their regulations. So anyway, that was great fun, and that just on the other side of the wall. I can't show you the wall. I can't show you the room on the other side of the wall now because now it's actually operational, so it's like top secret. But anyway, it's just a nice room, and these are some of the players. Simon Sheether from Statistics was a PI on the grant. Walt Peacock in the shorts in the middle, he was also a PI on the grant. He's going to be joining us this fall as assistant director, so a lot of you from Lau. His specific role will be to try to bring some interdisciplinary proposals out of landscape architecture, urban planning. There's some recent hires that are we're getting a critical mass in the area of social vulnerability. You can see that we were doing some renovations. I always like to put this picture up because this little box right here cost us about $10,000 in order to make Census Bureau security people happy, and it's just silly stuff. But so for a year, so we are in the third month of our third year of a 5-year founding period. So the first year, we were just trying to make the lab operational. And eventually, last year in October, so what is that, 14 months ago, we had a grand opening. And so this is the director of the Census Bureau, Tom Messenborg. Here's our soon-to-be departed president. I don't know who this guy is. I've never seen this guy wearing a suit before. There's the dean of the College of Liberal Arts, Jose Bermudez. And at the time, the interim vice president for research was Teresa Fossett. So we had a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The Census Bureau sent down a team of 6 people, all very high level. So this was a big deal to them. It was a big deal to Texas A&M. And just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, with the initial founding, A&M is kicking in $250,000 a year to help get this thing operational and off the ground. And the A&M system is kicking in another $100,000 a year. They are giving us every chance to succeed, and these are tough times, state budget being what it is, federal budget being what it is. So we can't complain at all. What we have to do is make this work. If you have any interest in using this, you want to get active now so that this will continue. If it turns out that people need it, use it, do good things, it's going to continue. Okay, let's see. What more can we say? In the last year, since after the grand opening, we were always doing promotional work, but it's one thing to do promotional work for something that doesn't yet exist. We found that people paid a lot closer attention once the door was actually open, so we've been running workshops. We'll go and visit departments. So like I said earlier, anybody who wants us to go anywhere, if it'll fit our schedule, we will do it. We've had some really productive meetings with a dozen researchers or even half a dozen researchers. It could be very intimate. We can ask very specific, discipline specific. People can ask us discipline specific questions, and we can focus our answers. Okay, so what's the big deal? You will notice that we are a long way from any other dot on this map. Before we came along, there were no census research data centers anywhere in the middle of the country. The team of us, I said we started this back in 2008. We met with the director of the Census Bureau in 2008 and showed him this map. He said, that's an embarrassment. The Census Bureau wants us to succeed. This was an unserved region. researchers in this area who wanted to use the facilities of an RDC had to travel to Chicago as their best option, which is fun to go to Chicago, but it's not very convenient. If you take a look at the other RDCs, you'll see West Coast, UCLA, Berkeley, and Stanford, and the University of Washington, all very prestigious universities. Working up the East Coast, there's the Duke Research Triangle. So Research Triangle and Duke and NC State and University of North Carolina are all members of that consortium. The Census Bureau headquarters at Suitland, Maryland. There's the New York consortium has, they have an RDC at Baruch College in the City University of New York system. They also have a Cornell branch. And then there's Boston at the National Bureau of Economic Research has an RDC, Michigan, Chicago, Minnesota, and then there's one, I skipped the one in Atlanta, which kind of in reverse chronological order. We're the new kids on the block. Washington's the next youngest, and then Atlanta before them. Okay, so if you're counting, that's 15. Some of these are pairs, and if you count the pairs, then it drops down to like 12 or 13. There aren't very many of these themes nationally. We've got one here at Texas A&M, and that's a good thing. And on the slides, I tell you a little bit more about who's involved in this. I will take a moment to mention the founding consortium institutions. So A&M took the lead. There's a consequence of this, which is nice. I'll tell you in a minute. Also involved, along with the A&M system, was the University of Texas Austin, Baylor, and Rice has since joined. UT San Antonio is about to join the consortium. So the idea behind a consortium is to have a lot of institutions involved so that they can share the costs and make the facility available to a larger number of researchers. Okay, well, one of the things about Texas A&M taking the lead, just to brag on Texas A&M for a moment, if you want to make your colleagues around the country jealous, there will be no other RDC in Texas unless they are a branch off of us. We have a contract with the Census Bureau. It's called a Joint Statistical Project Agreement, which is exceptionally fun to work with lawyers and get these things done. So we have one of these contracts. Anyway, one of the stipulations in the contract is that UT Austin cannot have an RDC except as a branch off of us. That for some reason that was appealing to higher administrators here. So it's a nice thing, and we want them to have a branch off of us someday. That may happen. Right now they travel down 290 and then off 21. They come here to work, and super duper. By the way, when I said we would do presentations, we do presentations at UT on a pretty frequent basis. And you're in the economics department. Well, by email, you never know where stuff goes. It goes into the spam box. But you know Matthias Carey? Okay. Well, Matthias has been a good friend to us, and I've let him know. We'll come and make present. We presented at the Pop Center at UT Austin quite a few times, and
That's
Matthias.
Not very well linked with the economics department. It's becoming more linked.
Well.
Really not right.
Well, feel free to tell anybody if they'd like us to come over. We will. I talk to people at the LBJ school and other places. And, you know. Okay, so right, move along. Okay, a couple of quick things. It's a federal facility. This Joint Statistical Project Agreement that I mentioned. We send money. We're funding the federal government. We're funding this facility next door. That's a real dollar commitment. Okay, so I get down on my knees every morning and thank all the appropriate administrators here at Texas A&M who made the commitment. Some of them aren't with us anymore. They were around in 2008, 2009, 2010 when all the agreements were being struck. They've since moved on, many of them. But Robert Groves at the Census Bureau, he literally helped us write our proposal. He's not the director of the Census Bureau anymore. Other people there, Ron Jarman was very important in helping. You can see several names. Jose Bermudez, Dean of Liberal Arts, is still with us. Everybody else on this list has moved on. So what is it? What is it they're all helping bring to Texas A&M? Okay, an RDC is a unique research facility. We're related to the Census Bureau, so what good is that? We can get access to a host of census data files, data sets, that would not otherwise be available to researchers. In some cases, that means data sets that you know about already, decennial census, American Community Survey, current population survey. It also involves a lot of data sets you may not be aware of because they're collected for Census Bureau purposes or for some other purpose and never released publicly. But they're available through the Census Bureau if you have the right arrangement. So for example, there are files from the decennial census that give you the individual records for persons and households. Those are public use microsample files. Such files do not exist, public use files do not exist for the economic censuses that the Census Bureau conducts, and they conduct just scads of those censuses, census of wholesalers, retailers, manufacturers, etc. There are no public use files there are some public reports, but they're not public use files. Economists established RDCs so they could get access to the microdata on firms, businesses, employees, employers, etc. What do we have that makes this possible? We have this secure lab where, well, these data sets are not released to the public because there are strict rules about using them, protecting the confidentiality of individuals, protecting the confidentiality of firms and businesses. Some of the information is very, very sensitive. You would understand immediately why it can't be made public. Through an RDC, under the right conditions, you may be able to access some of those data and use them in your research. How do we do this exactly? There are a bunch of laws, there are regulations, federal regulations that govern who can touch and see these confidential or restricted access data. The way that our researchers become able to do that is by becoming, in a sense, unpaid federal employees. So you go through a vetting process. You have to have a good reason to use the data. And then if your project idea is approved, you go through a review process and you obtain something called special sworn status. And so several people in the room have special sworn status. Anybody can you flash your badge? You don't have to. This is a higher order of consciousness. And at that point, you are trusted by the Census Bureau and you're allowed to see confidential data, but only very narrowly defined data specific to your project. Okay, so that you can do that on the other side of this wall. Where else could you do that? Only in another RDC or at the Census Bureau itself. That's it. So we have something, if it's valuable to you, this is the only place you can get that access. So why are RDCs needed? The guidelines which protect these data, the federal regulations which protect the confidentiality of individuals, firms, businesses, etc., they're really taken extremely seriously. And the simplest thing for people to do would be not let anybody ever see the data. The next and not so simple thing to do is to create an RDC and create a set of protocols and procedures so that people can access the data. So that's why RDCs exist. They exist solely so academic researchers can gain access to these data that otherwise only federal employees would ever see. And so if you see an RDC in Washington or Atlanta or wherever, they're just like the one on the other side of the wall. They exist for only one reason, to look. They all look alike. They all use the same computer terminals. They all access the same data sets, and that's their only reason to be. This is just that list again. I'll point out, the group of universities that we're joining is a really highfalutin group of universities, and that's been a real boon to faculty recruitment and retention. In addition to the ones that are on there, I can tell you that there are a lot of other universities that are interested in obtaining RDCs, and this is a process where only a few at a time can apply and have a chance for approval. So we're lucky that we got our foot in the door, and a bunch of other places are queued up trying to get in, and it may be years before they get in. So I'm just stressing over and over that we have a good thing here. We want to take advantage of it while we can. So I've mentioned we have all this great data. You want to take advantage of that. I should also mention we have free parking, which at UT it should be a big deal. You can probably find a parking space here faster than finding one close to UT. That's been my experience. Okay, so now we're getting closer to useful information here. A few remarks to help you figure out whether an RDC can be useful for you or not. There are some really legitimate research needs which cannot be met with an RDC. There are some that can be met with an RDC. The ones that can be met are going to be more of your basic science kind of research with a long-term time horizon. So discipline-based substantive research, statistical and methodological research. This will all fit with kind of the reason for RDCs to exist. There's a lot of work that that anybody would like to do, but it can't be done in an RDC. And that's short-term oriented work for generating special tabulations and other quick inspections of detailed data to serve particular needs. That's never going to happen. So I want to make that really clear right off the bat so nobody has unrealistic expectations. If there's data that you need, and for some reason the Census Bureau doesn't release it, and you can't generate it out of publicly available materials, that's never going to appear in public. And it's already been vetted that that's not going to happen. And if you get access to an RDC, you could see the data in more detail, but you can never take it out into the public. And there's a real simple reason why you never found it in public to begin with. It couldn't be released because it violated confidentiality guidelines. And will be bound, all of the research that's done in the RDC is bound by those same guidelines. So what you can do in the RDC is you can see detailed data, but you can't like run a special table and then go take it out and share it with anybody. You can work with it, you can gain knowledge and generate findings using those detailed data, but you can't actually show those data to anyone. All you can show are the byproducts of working with those data. Regression equation coefficients, summary descriptive statistics, and some other things. So that's very important. Like probably half of the inquiries that I get are from people with really legitimate needs. They want to do planning for health services in the Houston metropolitan area. They need a detailed geographic distribution of poverty. It's available. It's possible. It's never going to be released. There's already a mechanism for releasing that kind of data, and the confidentiality guidelines keep that at a pretty high level of geography, and that's too bad for the planners. Okay, so just trying to help you know what would be good. Okay, so what do you find in here that's good stuff?
Can I ask?
Please jump in anytime.
Whatever. On this thing about tables and such, let's suppose that you had access to some what would be ordinarily confidential data, and now you go in and say, look at the proportion of the data that has certain characteristics. Would that qualify as something you couldn't take outside, or?
Well, that's in the borderline area.
Yeah.
That's sounding kind of like summary statistics.
Right.
And that can work. There will be guidelines. Even for summary statistics, there'll be some guidelines about the underlying population or sample base that statistic is based on. And if you could back engineer it, they worry about stuff like that. So they'll look at the cell frequencies associated with proportions and things. They really don't like anything that looks like a table. There's something called the disclosure review process. And disclosure review, if it looks like a table, they're really going to look at it very carefully. Because people can back engineer tables, not only in the obvious way, but there are already other publicly released tables. If your table can be combined with a publicly released table, you may be able to identify something. This is especially important in economic data, where like Monsanto is Monsanto. There's like no way to hide Monsanto. And if you get some low-level geography and there's like this multi-million-dollar thing, you can't tabulate that in any way that doesn't. It will always reveal Monsanto. So back to what's here that you might want. Well, first of all, there's microdata. A lot of times you can find census reports that are tables, tabulations, summary statistics. This would give you potentially the detailed microdata that those reports are based on, which means if the tables that you found or the reports that you saw didn't meet your needs, by going in the RDC, you might be able to get exactly what you need by working directly with the microdata, looking at the data in more detail. You can get more detailed information than you might be aware is available based on looking at public data sets. So if you're using the decennial census, the income question is going to be more detailed, the race question is going to be more detailed, geography is going to be more detailed, a number of other things. You'll get to see them, you'll get to see the individual responses before they've been edited and processed by Census Bureau procedures. There's something like, if you're studying the way people move around and migration or neighborhood change, you can see where people live now, where they lived before. You can hardly see that in any detail at all in the publicly available data. You can see full population counts. So if you get access to the decennial data and use the 100% form, see every person in the United States ostensibly. You can't get that with a public use microsample. That's your PUMS files are going to be 5% files. The largest ones will be 5%. Even when you're working with sample data, it's likely that the internal file is a much larger sample, sometimes twice the size of the original sample. And the one that is released publicly is a subset. I mentioned you can see the original responses on some items, so you can, things like income are not top-coded, other variables are not yet edited. You get lower geographic detail. Now next, this is really a big deal. You can link data. So with publicly released data, there's no way you're ever going to link two data sets. Inside the RDC, it may be possible. You could, in principle, link Social Security and IRS records from administrative sources with business data, economic data, and if you've looked at our list of research presentations, people have come in and talked about income inequality, where they could look at the earnings through Social Security of father and son over their lifespan and study inequality in ways that are inconceivable outside of the RDC. How is this linking done? It's done through non-public link keys, PICs, PICs. You don't ever get to touch those. In some cases, they really don't even want you to know they exist. Only a small number of people are authorized to work with these codes. But many of these data sets have already been linked for the needs of the Census Bureau or some other agency or for previous research projects. If they have not already been linked and you have a good research idea and you can sell it to other people, they may perform the link so that you can bring two data sets together. Okay, let's see. Just to let you know very quickly, in a lot of fields, you may be here already because you're aware of this. In a field where RDCs and data sets available within RDCs have become important, it changes the field. And that is, once the data sets start being used, it's very hard for the research in that area to go back. because the previous data were much less satisfactory for answering the kinds of questions that were of interest. So, for example, Amber's dissertation is going to involve looking at low-level geography to study residential segregation. These are just starting to appear in the journals. In another decade, there'll never be a paper on segregation done using the old publicly available data, because we'll just be doing something much superior. So this, if it hasn't happened in your field and you're the first one there, that's a big plus. If it's already happened in your field, you may have to worry about playing catch up.
Sorry, could you go repeat that last paragraph? 2 paragraphs.
I'll try. Let's see if I say it the same way twice. If a field has, if RDC data and analysis has begun to have an impact in a field, typically the data are superior to anything that's publicly available. And then once findings from those analyses become part of the base of knowledge in that field, you can't go back anymore. You can't go back and use the old data because you're answering questions that are much less detailed. The analyses are much less sophisticated. And so, for example, in the study of income inequality, it's all the old studies are getting wiped out because the stuff you can do with the combination of census records and administrative records is telling us more about how income is distributed over the lifetime than we could never study this using publicly available data. It's just not feasible. So that field is being transformed, and we know things now that are amazing in terms of how solid the results are. There were conjectures before, now there's hard evidence. And what we know, for example, is that estimates of social mobility that were taken as gospel in the 1980s and 90s have all been turned over. The United States has much less social mobility than anybody ever thought. And it's by having the better data that you can see how immobile people are. That's just one aside. I happen to know that only because it's close to the subjects I study. You have a question? No? RDC research is in all these fields: business, crime and criminology, demography, economics, education and education policy, hazards research, health studies, housing studies, poverty and social welfare, transportation planning. I could go on and on and on. One of the things that we offer as a service is to try to help you identify work that may have been done in your area. If you're not sure, we can help you. If you already know, maybe we can go a little bit further with you. I have a long list of examples of data sets. These can be accessed at our website. They're on the handout. The main thing for having these slides is just to try to impress you with volume. If there are hundreds of data sets, it doesn't matter if you don't care about any of these data sets. So, what you really care about is there one data set that you might imagine ever working? So there are, if you go to our website, you can find these links, the National Center for Health Statistics, the Center for Economic Studies, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. They all have links that could tell you more about data sets. You'll hear a little bit more about them in a few minutes from Amber and Maria and others. What is going on in RDCs? Just to give you some background, if you're thinking about doing RDC work, are you hitching your wagon to a rising star or a star that's crested? It's a rising star. Okay. A decade ago, there were 7 or 8 RDCs. Now there are 15. In another decade, there's going to be 30, maybe more than 30. RDC activity is increasing. A decade ago, probably 80% of the activity was by economists. Now, work by economists has grown, but research by others has grown even faster, and now only about 50% of research is by economists. Health researchers have really come on, demographers, planners, education researchers, housing researchers, they're all much more active than they were 10 years ago. And when we were going for an RDC, I and other people involved in our team were going to meetings, and we were grabbing people by the arm who had an RDC and said, "How'd you do it? How'd you do it?" And now they're doing that to us. There are people all around the country who want RDCs. So RDCs are here to stay. You know, we want the one at Texas A&M to be part of that network and to be successful. So some things to understand. We're organized under a consortium model. That's a good thing. That wasn't always true. Many RDCs initially were established on a project-by-project basis. So you got access to an RDC by having a big grant. The consortium model is different. You want to know about how it works in the short run. In the short run, because you're at A&M or at UT, they have paid an institutional membership fee that covers the cost, helps cover the cost of the lab. You get free access. At another place, like let's say that you were at Texas Tech and you wanted to do a project here, I would charge you $15,000 per year per project. So if you had a 3-year project, that would be $45,000. Consortium membership fee, essentially, if you get 2 projects, you justified the consortium membership fee, and then everybody in the institution can come in. So we're under a model that promotes research activity. So our justification is to show that research activity happens, which is why we're doing these workshops. Okay. Some things about usage. More data sets are coming in all the time. And there are trends. If you use census data, you'll already be aware of this, but the 2010 decennial census was not at all like the 2000 and earlier decennial censuses. There was no long form in the 2010 decennial census. So the only game in town for the detailed data that is collected on the long form is the American Community Survey, an ongoing 1% sample every year. And you've got to aggregate that over several years to get anything like the sample size that you would have gotten from the decennial files in the past. And the only way you can do that and get low-level geography or some of the other stuff you'd want is in an RDC. So there's a whole class of research that used to be done, in some cases, with public use files, which has gotten harder to do. It can be done, but the sample sizes are much smaller now. And by going in the RDC, you can overcome some of that. RDC activity is increasing because there are more centers. The protocols are getting better. So you're dealing with the federal government and security and confidentiality. So there are some paperwork hoops to jump through, and that's getting a little bit better. And okay, let's talk now about what's required. These are things that you'd want to know before you start talking more specifics. Okay, in order to conceive of a project, you've got to meet a couple of criteria. There has to be a clear need. Like if you're going to get permission to see stuff that by regulation you would not ordinarily be able to see, there has to be a compelling need. You have to meet guidelines that pertain to those data relating to benefits that will come about because of your research. And these guidelines will vary depending on the kind of data you're using. And then you have to meet all security and policy concerns that are relevant. So, if you're working with public data, none of these things matter. You get the data, you use them, you can explore them, who knows, it's all relatively costless and just your time investment. You've got to convince people on a number of counts that you have a need to see the data, you're going to follow the appropriate guidelines and protocols, and you're a good safety net on security and confidentiality concerns. This issue of benefits it turns out to be really important, especially for some kinds of projects. The fact that there are any RDCs at all is because There's a set of, in the text of the regulations that governs confidentiality of data, it says that the Census Bureau can bring in outside researchers to help them with their own analysis if the Census Bureau benefits. So if you're using census data, you're going to have to benefit the Census Bureau. You're going to be deputized by the Census Bureau to help them. And along the way, you'll also get to do your own work. So this is absolutely important because without that benefit, they will not let you through the door.
You just answered my question. When you say benefit here, you're talking about directly to the Census Bureau.
Yeah, and they
as
are,
opposed to the federal government.
and it takes a while. This is the beginning of a conversation. I could, you'll learn more about what that might involve. But if you do this much work, it's not this much work that benefits the census. Somewhere there just has to be enough of your work which benefits them. So a common occurrence, for example, would be that, Amber, can you talk about the benefit of your project?
Yes, so my dissertation focuses on residential attainment and segregation, so I'm going to be using the microdata from the decennial census and the American Community Survey. And as Mark mentioned, the American Community Survey is a much smaller sample than the decennial long from the past. So one of the benefits that I provided to Census in my proposal was that I was going to demonstrate how this smaller sample of ACS could be used in research. And then my second benefit was that I'd be producing population estimates. So both of those things are things that you can put into your proposal as a way of justifying these. I'm sorry?
What is it you study?
I'm in sociology and I do demography. Oh, the area, block and block. National level. So segregation block level.
Well, so you can see block geography, and the analytical unit would be the person or household. So in principle, you can see, using the information. Well, some information in the census is absolutely suppressed. You'll never see a street address. You'll never see a name. But going down to the block level, some blocks only have 5 households. You can see households, and you can see their entire composition in the census records. And so you can imagine things for modeling and for studies that are inconceivable outside of the RDC. Whether that makes sense, that's another thing. So, okay, going back to the tried and true standard of measurement, the big circle. How much of the census benefit would your circle of work be? This much?
Yeah, just a tiny bit of it. So basically, it's integrated into what I'm going to be producing.
So you have to take the benefit seriously, because it's got to be taken seriously to get your foot in the door. But there's no requirement that it drive your research. It just has to be real, and then your research can be much more expansive.
One of the projects that we talk about it, but that we an iterative process where you go back and forth on defining the benefit, or is it like a one-time?
The benefit has to be defined up front. You won't be approved unless they're convinced that you're going to see a benefit, that you're going to create a benefit. And when the census people, they've come here several times and helped out with promotional presentations, they will stress, your benefit may be a failure. That's okay. They want to know. So it's not like you have to produce positive results. You just have to answer questions where they care about the answers. So if Amber winds up showing that the ACS won't sustain segregation research as we would hope it would, that's valuable information for them. And the Census Bureau has a tradition of census materials being used for segregation research, and the transition to the ACS may interrupt that. Amber's going to find out.
Before we put together the proposal, is there a chance or is there a way by which such can look at possibly the variables in the data? So they don't have to look at the data per se, but at least what's there in the data.
Simple answer is yes. and that's through the proposal development process. So I'm giving the overview when I turn into Bethany after the break. Bethany will talk about the things that have to be accomplished in a proposal and the steps. What we try to do, what Bethany and I working together try to do, is keep your effort to the bare minimum needed until it's very clear that this is a viable effort. Because you don't want to spend a lot of time and then find out, oh, this can't be done. Or there's no way a benefit can be established. Or there are some other things that we're very attuned to. And we can help you know whether or not this is a dead end or whether it could go somewhere very, very welcome. So just, is anybody watching the time? I guess I don't have a clock on.
Actually, we've gone over the break time.
Over the break time, naturally, okay. So I'll postpone talking about benefits because they are also covered in Bethany's portion of the program. We've actually covered quite a few things. There are some things I don't want to skip over. Let me see. Doctoral students, assistant professors, associate professors, full professors. There are some, for people at different stages of their academic career, there's some things to be aware of. Doing work in an RDC has a longer startup time, and it has a longer middle part, and it has a longer conclusion time. So if you're working with public data, and that project would take a year, you might want to plan on an RDC project taking at least 2 or 3 years. The reason why is the proposal process to get access to the data is very likely to take a year. It could take a little bit less, it could take more. Then once you get approved, you got to get a security clearance. There's some time involved in that, at least 2 or 3 months. Then you walk into a new computing environment. You got to learn to use it and to use the data as provided to you by Census. These are not public use files. They're going to be messier. The documentation is not as clean. Even if you're familiar with the data, you'll have to learn them again. And then finally, you do your analysis. Now you want to take your results out. You don't just walk out the door with a printout. You have to go through what's called the disclosure review process. Disclosure review is a process where someone like Bethany, a Census Bureau employee, looks at what you are requesting to take outside. They review it to see if any guidelines for confidentiality or other concerns are being compromised. And so you have to present your results to them. Usually you have a conversation about this way back at the beginning while you're developing a proposal. Feasibility includes knowing that you can get out what you need it to get out. So for most researchers, if what you're getting out is coefficients estimated from a regression model or some other kind of modeling approach, those coefficients are not going to disclose any person, any firm, or anything. You'll be able to take that out. With a little bit of careful planning, that will be a mostly painless, although there will be some time involved, and it's kind of bureaucratically structured, but you'll get out what you want out. That's why it's, we would visit with you ahead of time. Now, for a graduate student, you know, if you're on funding and you've got a couple of years of funding and you've got a project that you need to talk with us very carefully about time frame to make sure you're not getting in over your head. If you're an assistant professor and you have a defined timeline for coming up for tenure review, we would talk with you very carefully about whether this project that you're thinking about is going to provide you anything helpful in the time frame that you need for your tenure review. We don't want anybody to have a bad outcome. You know, you might have a wonderful project with results that come in 18 months after you've been denied tenure. That would be horrible. So we don't ever want that to happen. And all that means is you want to talk with us a lot. And so here's like, I want in, or at least I'm curious. What do you want to talk to? What are you going to do? You want to talk to me, the director, and you want to talk to Bethany, the administrator. That's our number one job, is to help you learn in more careful detail, is this the right thing for you? And if so, how do you go about it? If it looks viable, we'll encourage you to think about the seed grant program. And you can do a lot of exploring on your own, but absolutely, I advise you, do not go running off, getting deep into proposal preparation without taking advantage of talking to us. There would be an advantage to talk with us. And not the least of which is that Bethany and I both have to approve the project before it can be submitted to Census. They won't receive a proposal from you. Well, you can send it to them, they'll receive it, and then they will say, where's the approval from the TXCRDC? And if that approval is not there, they're going to send it back, and they'll be quite irritated about the whole thing. Because, well, there's one person who they didn't like what they heard, and so they were trying to get around some of the guidelines, and so they just submitted a proposal directly to Census because they didn't like the advice they were getting from the RDC administrator. That person was blackballed. They can't go to an RDC anywhere in the country because they're not a good risk for working with confidential data. They've already shown that they cannot work with this system. So Bethany and I, you need to talk to us so that we can bless your,
The project involves 3 or 4 authors. Do all of them need to get approved? Or you so can
the project gets approved.
Okay.
At least one person has to obtain special sworn status to be able to go in the lab and do work. Now, if you've got colleagues, you're doing work in the lab, you can't share that work with them. You can't take output out. If they want to see the raw data or if they want to see intermediate results, they'll have to also get special sworn status. Now, you can have a colleague at Berkeley. They can get special sworn status. They can go in the lab there. They'll be affiliated with the project you have going here. They'll see everything you can see. It's one network. Everything will be identical. And that's very important. If you are a graduate student and your advisor does not get special sworn status, that could pose complications for you because they can't see any intermediate results. You'll be describing things to them verbally, but you can't take any printouts out. You can't take screenshots. You can't take anything. And there's not a lab assistant on the inside to help you. So if you have a decision about, look at this distribution, how should I code this variable? It's all going to be verbal descriptions based on your memory. They can't help you at all.
There's also things you just can't even say.
Oh, well, yeah.
Is it okay to verbally describe it?
Well, you could, within some limits. I mean, well, there are some things, like you can say it's a highly skewed distribution with some outliers.
I think the answer to this is obvious, but I think most of the models then have estimated using the software that's available.
Yes.
You cannot.
Isn't that right?
Okay, well, there's more to come, and some of it will, it'll be a bit of a repeat. So there's some room for a comment. Are people ready for a break? Take a break. We'll come back and we'll have some presentations about the research environment, how to scout out data sets, and then